Mr. Snow, after everything you've seen out there in the world, what are the Hunger Games for?
Are you?
Snow is such an awful guy from the original trilogy and books. How'd you tap into that descent and that turn that he makes?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. He was such an awful character in those films, but we get to rewind the tape on him now and look at him kind of before he becomes so awful. And definitely in the process of this film, from start to finish, you see an arc where he's becoming a more of a tyrant to be. But I think what's so cool and so interesting about being able to play him is that I got to kind of dig deeper into the question of why he becomes like that, and whether he was born like it or whether it's he's kind of a product of the circumstance of living in Panem.
Lucy's such a cool character. She's so different from Katniss. What do you think Lucy and Katniss would have thought of one another?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think Lucy Gray definitely has her apprehensions about violence, and I think they would have both been able to agree about how they didn't want to kill anyone going into the games, and what a difficult debacle it is to be in and to be forced into. And I think Lucy Gray would probably try to give Katniss tips on how to be likable to the general masses, or she would try to. But I feel like Lucy Gray's got such a positive attitude towards life and everything it throws her that she'd be able to convince Katniss that winning the crowd over is her best means of survival.
Tom, what do you think your iteration of Snow would think of where he ended up, the Donald Sutherland iteration down the line?
I think it depends when you asked him, because at the beginning, I think he would say, I could never be that. I still have hope in humanity. I still love my family, my grandmom and my cousin Tigris. And he still has love in his heart. I think by the end of the film, he is a lot closer to being that later version. And I think if you asked him then, he'd say that's how society has to be controlled. And that's kind of the crux of the film. The big question is like, does someone need to be evil to survive, or can they be a ray of hope and still get out alive and with hope and joy, which is a big kind of esoteric question that we get to ask. I don't know that we get the answer, but we get to ask it.
Rachel, what do you think the biggest difference is between Lucy and Katniss?
I definitely think that it's their willingness to perform. Katniss is notoriously, and then she says this to Cinna, she doesn't, not many people like her. She doesn't want to make people like her. She's not good at making friends. And so I think Lucy Gray's kind of the antithesis of that. I don't necessarily think she's completely different from Katniss in that regard, but they're both doing things by a means of survival and saving themselves and wanting to help their family. So, they definitely have a lot more in common than not, but the things that make them different are very big things.
Tigris, fans of the Hunger Games are going to know that character. How's she different this time around? How did you feel about drawing Snow, to the good side?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, we met Tigris in Mockingjay Part 2, or just the Mockingjay book, but clearly it's very clear kind of visually that a lot has happened to her between this book and where we are in Mockingjay. And I think I was encouraged to kind of bring a level of myself to Tigris, and not to like try to emulate the sort of like poised tiger lady too much that we meet in Mockingjay. So I felt safe to kind of like explore and have a sense of like creativity with this version of Tigris.
Josh, Sejanus is kind of the moral compass for Snow. What was the turning point, you think, for Snow? The point of no return where that character breaks bad?
That's a difficult question to answer without spoiling it for people who haven't seen it yet. But I think something that's really Tragic is the wrong word, but I think fascinating is you already know where we get to with Snow's character arc. Obviously, we have the original trilogy that backs up that he's not the best guy ultimately. But something that's really, really fun about this movie, fun also might be the wrong word, but that I had a really interesting time watching it, because the entire time, even though you know what ends up happening, it's like you want to believe that he can come into his potential and be a good person. Something so tragic about Sejanus's character is the entire time he does not spend a moment doubting Snow's potential as like a good human being. He really believes that Snow is a good person. And I think that's something that the average audience member might struggle with too, is wanting so badly throughout the film for a bunch of different choices to be made. But then we wouldn't have the plot for the original, so.
Hunter, what would your version of Tigris think of, where she ends up down the line in the Hunger Games trilogy?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's sort of like a mystery. I mean, I hope it's something we get to find out at some point. As of right now, I can only kind of use my imagination. But it's really fun to think. I feel like I want to see like some fan theories about like what happens in between My Tigris and Steel Tigris,
I love origin stories. I love when we get to see a good villain origin story. Is there an ingredient? Is there, a story point that you think they all need to have?
I would say a key component is the complexity there. You want people to be, viewers and readers alike, you want them to be asking themselves the same question that the main character is asking themselves. Snow's big dilemma is about survival. He's trying to survive, and he's doing whatever it takes to survive. And, that ends up becoming more and more and more self-beneficial as the movie goes on. But I think the movie does an amazing job at we as the viewer are in this with him. We see his perspective. We're asking ourselves the same questions that he's asking. And, some people might go one way, some people would go left when he went right, but not always. I think that's the empathy there, I think, is the key component.
Welcome to the Capitol.
You look like you shouldn't be here.
I shouldn't, but I'm your mentor.
A rebel.
I am gonna get you out of here.
If you want to protect people, then it's essential to accept what human beings are.